Hey, welcome back, my friends. So I did have a run it by my lawyer, and this is how that first topic of this, the DACA and college students. So what I'm referring to is what's called the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. So basically, let's say some sort of, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, an illegal immigrant, a undocumented migrant, however you describe it, somebody like that comes to America, they have children, either they, come with the children or, they bring the children in later, whatever it is, right? So a lot of times they kind of defer the deportation of the kids, so to speak, right? And so a lot of times those kids grow up, right? They go to high school, they want to go to college, they want to get a driver's license, all that jazz. And just in this month, in October 2022, the federal court said that they, can obviously prosecute these folks or deport some of them. They can go to colleges and ask them, are you, where's your papers, right? So a local college here in San Diego, Mira Costa College, and it's a lot of other colleges kind of, do the same route. They sent an email on October 10, 2022 to the students, and they pointed out that the federal government wants colleges to, ask student for the immigration papers, or if, let's say someone gets busted for a parking ticket or something, the college official or the college police can say, oh, where's your parking pass? And oh, by the way, where's your citizenship paperwork, right? So this particular college, and like I said, some other colleges, including my alma mater of UCLA, they have taken the position that they will not help the federal government find these undocumented kids, okay, that are going now. They're not really kids, right? They're actually adults, right? They're going to college now, right? And they're not going to help the federal government. In fact, Mira Costa College straight said, we will not cooperate with federal efforts to unlawfully detain any students. That's pretty crazy. They're saying unlawfully detain students. Meaning if the federal government wants them to detain after they find that someone's illegal alien there, right? And Mira Costa College will not detain, question, or arrest any individual solely on the basis of their immigration status, okay? So interesting stuff here. We're obviously, this is a state college, right? And they are fighting with the federal government, okay? So interesting stuff. And clearly this will go on for a long time, so I'll keep you posted, and maybe we'll do a whole episode just on the DACA college students. All right. Now, the main topic for today is Los Angeles Skid Row. There are thousands and thousands of these homeless people in Los Angeles in this little area called Skid Row. I call it little area. It's about 50 square blocks. So it is a big, big area. And what a lot of people don't know about this Los Angeles, I'm sure you've seen videos and pictures. Here's a couple footage, some footage of it. Let's roll it right here while we're discussing, all the homeless encampments and stuff, right? So it's obviously very sad. It's a difficult situation. It doesn't look great for the city of Los Angeles. A lot of people are living in this squalor. What a lot of people don't realize is this is a very historical district in Los Angeles, the Skid Row. It is not something that just kind of popped out in the last few years. Some homeless people. This traces back to the 1800s, okay? In the 1800s, the big railroads, when they were expanding, and they were coming to California, and a lot of the railroads came through, near Los Angeles, and they employed a lot of immigrant men, okay? And there was a lot of seasonal work, and what they needed is places for these transient workers, transient being they're seasonal workers, they're gonna go back home or whatever when the season's up, right? They needed a place to house them. So they picked this area. It's east of Los Angeles, downtown. It's, the property values are very cheap. We're not talking, Bel Air or Santa Monica, right? We're talking very east Los Angeles. It gets hot in that area. If it's almost as bad as Riverside, right? So anyway, we're talking east Los Angeles. So they put a lot of these immigrant men there. That was their housing. Okay. And what are these, seasonal workers? What popped up in this time? A lot of brothels and bars and, gambling sites, pawn shops, things like that. It just so happened to pop up, right? Now, it went on for decades, and then it just became like kind of a poor area, an area where kind of, transient workers and people that became homeless, like they were kind of like sent there or they went there, things like that. In the 80s, things kind of got like kind of bigger, like almost out of control. So times, there was in 1987, the infamous Los Angeles Police Department chief, Daryl Gates. You might know. Anyone remember what Daryl Gates is famous for? Rodney King riot. He was the police chief back then. So in the 80s, he was notorious for conducting what they called sweeps, meaning they would just arrest people that were homeless there, kind of like certain times. And this is a practice that in the 40s started with the LAPD. There was, what is this? The police chief in 1947, Clemens Horrell. He would conduct what was called a blockade raid and just in a random time go and arrest everyone that was homeless. And then the problem, obviously this got worse and worse. And in the 80s, there would be, a lot of fires started happening in this area. And the reason for the fires in the Skid Row area is a lot of times the people are cooking in an open flame. Like the kitchen is just an outdoor kitchen, right? And so sometimes fires would start that way. Sometimes there'd be a dispute over property or drugs or whatever. And somebody would, light a fire or start a fire, I mean. And so things happen that way. Then there was some legal issues that it's kind of like, who knows if it made things better or worse. And I'm going to address some of them right now real quick. Okay, in 2006, there was a case, the James versus Los Angeles. The homeless advocates were fighting with the city of Los Angeles. And one of the things that there was a crime, which would be if you set up a tent in public property, and if that tent was there from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. So basically, if you have a tent that's set up and you're in a tent from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. type of thing, it would be a crime in the city of Los Angeles. And in 2006, there was a case that then kind of decriminalized that practice. So what happened was it decriminalized that practice. And it, especially in Skid Row, like it just happened to be that they stopped enforcing that in the Skid Row area. So guess what happened, right? This is why I said, was it good, was it bad? Tents popped up everywhere in that area starting in, 2006. Like there was an explosion of people living in these tents, right? Because it wasn't enforced that they can't have tents and they can't sleep there, right? Now we fast forward to the 2020s, okay? In the year 2020, we have a lawsuit filed by the Los Angeles Alliance for Human Rights, and they filed a lawsuit against the city of Los Angeles and the county of Los Angeles. And this lawsuit was a very interesting one, and it ended up, costing the city of Los Angeles a lot of money. And I'm going to explain why, all right? The lawsuit itself states that the Skid Row is illegal and that, people are losing their rights and the situation is very unsanitary. It's very dangerous. It's very, polluted. And it's the responsibility of the city of Los Angeles to start remedying this right away. Now, here's where in the very beginning I said there's kind of this big conflict between the state government and the federal government. Now, when I say state government, that includes the city of Los Angeles. So now what happened is this. They filed this lawsuit in the federal district court. All right. So what we have here is we're going with this group, this LA Alliance for Human Rights. They are going and they are seeking redress from a federal court, so a federal judge who works for the United States government. And they're asking the United States government to force the city of Los Angeles to fix this area and make it safer and find, build shelters and all of that for the homeless people there. So because you can't just file a lawsuit, you have to have some sort of authority, okay? And here the authority is that, like I said, they're going to the federal government. Now, what statute they're looking at, it's a statute that the Congress enacted in the 1970s. It's funny because it's called the 1983. It's codified under 42 United States Code, section 1983. But it was in the 70s. Okay, the 1983 is just what number they codified the statute under. All right, that is the federal law, and this is what the federal law says. Every person who, under the color of any statute, ordinance, regulation, custom, or usage, that's just a fancy way of saying any government official, okay, here's the key words, of any state or territory, so Puerto Rico and, or District of Columbia. Okay, so this federal statute, so the first clause is any government official, the next one of any state, all right, and being the city of Los Angeles is a state. Causes to be subjected any citizen of the United States or other person within the jurisdiction thereof to the deprivation of any rights, privileges, or immunities secured by the Constitution. And it says, shall be liable to that party. So what this says is the federal Congress made it a law that said if a state government takes away certain rights or, doesn't give these certain rights and privileges to the people within the jurisdiction, then that government is liable to those persons. Okay, this is the federal statute. And there was a civil war fought over this, right? The Civil War being the, how strong the federal government is in relation to the state government. But the key here is this. It resulted in this kind of dichotomy here, this fight between the federal government and the state government. So this particular law, this 1983, Section 1983 cases, what Congress did is they then said that it is a federal law that the state cannot deprive the people in the United States of their rights, okay? So this is how all of this is then playing out in this particular case. And I always say this, I say almost in every single case, there's a kind of history, like, well, why is this case coming in this court? Why is the remedy being sought, this type of remedy? Like, why are they going to this judge and all that jazz, right? And all of that has a long history. So this is why they filed this case in the federal court, okay? Because of those reasons. And it has been adjudicated that Congress does have that right to force the states to do this, okay? That has been, the United States Supreme Court has adjudicated that, like I said. And if you don't like it, you could leave the union and we'll just fight to bring you back in, which is what happened, okay? So here we go. Now, so they filed that lawsuit in the year 2020. Now, there's more. What ended up happening is right when they filed the lawsuit, they asked that the court issue what's called a preliminary injunction, because the lawsuit itself, it may take 5 years, 6 years, 7 years to determine if the city of Los Angeles did deprive, like if they, kind of intentionally did this, or they had kind of, bad policies. And I only brushed through some of the history. There was also, those raids and everything. There was also these policies that were coming out that they alleged that kind of the city intentionally kind of contained homelessness in this area. And there was it was notorious examples of like some public hospitals and the police officers, like when somebody, after they got arrested or after they were released from jail or after they, got out of the hospital, they would drop them off. Guess where? Beverly Hills. No, just kidding. They would drop them off in Skid Row. Do you see what I'm saying? So it was kind of like the allegation is that there was the city intentionally kind of contained, they call it the policy of containment in this area, okay, that the homelessness would last. So there would ultimately have to be a jury trial to adjudicate this, which is crazy, and it would take a long time, all right? So what happened was this LA Alliance for Human Rights, they filed for a preliminary injunction. What that means is they said, hey, in the time it takes to adjudicate this, it may take 5 years, we want remedy now. We want like some action now. We want, we want this to be addressed now. And then in the interim, in the 5 years that it takes to adjudicate all of this, then we could decide if they screwed up or not, right? And the United States District Court granted that. And what the United States District Court granted is something that I thought was just unreal. The United States District Court, so the federal judge said to the city of Los Angeles, put aside $1 billion. What was it that Dr. Evil? $1 billion, right? Put aside $1 billion into an escrow account. And from that, start building shelters. Okay, just start this immediately. And it was okay, what else was it? This is the district court. Granted the preliminary injunction. Escrow of $1 billion to address the homelessness crisis, offers of shelter or housing to all unhoused individuals in Skid Row within 6 months, and numerous audits and reports. The district court's order was premised on its finding that and then they're saying that the district court said that this was just a disaster, what's going on in LA, and that it was unsafe, and there was like structural racism, and they found that as part of the reasoning behind this. They found that there was discriminatory lending practices. There was freeway construction that forced this kind of Skid Row to happen the way it did, and all that jazz. Okay, that is a ginormous decision by a federal court, and it was done without a trial or anything. It was just kind of like on a preliminary injunction, which is a very big deal. Then, just kind of like the procedural history of this case, the city of Los Angeles appealed that. So they went from the district court judge, they filed an appeal, and then they were able to get a hearing at the appellate level. So they go to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, this one is weird because, and this is a lot for you young lawyers or law students or people interested in the law, why the heck do cases take so long? Then it took a year for the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal to make a decision. And that decision was only limited to the preliminary injunction, okay? So so that decision comes out. Where's the opinion there? Oh, it's right here, okay? So in 2021, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal then makes a decision. When I said they go to a hearing in the Ninth Circuit, that took about a year to finally get the hearing. What the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal ruled was that no, we are going to strike that preliminary injunction, meaning that the Ninth Circuit found that the district court made an error by granting this preliminary injunction. The reasoning behind that is that the Ninth Circuit basically said the district court didn't have sufficient evidence to find that, on this preliminary basis, that there was like some sort of like structural racism. They weren't able to find on this preliminary basis that there was some sort of, discrimination based on race, and that on this particular ground that they weren't able to find that any sort of constitutional rights. Now, it is a constitutional rights that people cannot be discriminated against based on their race, gender, nationality. And somehow the Ninth Circuit Court said, you might be able to find that after a long, discovery process and then a trial. But on this preliminary basis, it's not there, okay? Which might confuse a lot of people, right? But that's what it might confuse a lot of people, because people would say, well, of course, there was these, generations of these laws and rules and housing practices and all of that. But the Ninth Circuit Supreme Court disagrees. They said that on this preliminary basis, we can't find that. We need a full-on trial. you gotta bless the judges. Like they just created a lot more litigation, you know. So God bless them, right? So anyway, so they struck down that preliminary injunction, and then they did what's called, they sent the case back to the trial court. So then the case was back to the trial court, and then in the year 2022, earlier this year, the case started proceeding in the trial court, right? So it took 2 years, ready for this, for absolutely nothing to happen, all right? Because in those 2 years, it was actually 2.5 years because they filed it in early 2020. For 2.5 years, all we did is we had a decision from the trial court that took a long time, and that was to grant this preliminary injunction. Then we had an appeal, and the appeal stayed the execution of that order in the district court. Then we had another year where then the appellate court denied they denied that the district court made the right decision in the trial court level. So then they sent the case back, and it took like another year to get back in there. Okay. So basically then 2.5 years later, we're back at the trial court after absolutely nothing happened, except that, my favorite line, a lot of lawyers made a lot of money in that time, okay? Other than that, nothing really happened, okay? Then came the case. So the case is happening in the year 2022. And now what happens is this. The city and the Alliance for Human Rights, this organization, they then have to engage in discovery and kind of like they have to start proving their case so that ultimately there could be a trial. And a lot of those things that I was saying, you know, before, you know, that's where all the evidence comes out, because they have to prove, the plaintiffs, you know, which is the homeless advocates, they have to prove that the city of Los Angeles violated the constitutional rights of all these people, meaning they had discriminatory practices, you know, based on race, for example, that led, you know, to a high population of African Americans and Mexicans in Skid Row. They have to show that there was like city of Los Angeles practices that you know, took away these people's rights to, you know, like education and you know, and medical services and things like that, right? Then they have to kind of also prove that there's a like remedy for it too. Okay, so this is a lot that they have to prove. You know, they have this like systemic injustice. Now, by the way, it's in a lot of cases. There's a lot of lawsuits, you know, claiming that the like voting districts are you know, were racially made. You know, is that right? Racially made? You know what I'm saying, right? That they were racially discriminatory reasons for how they were drawn up. So then those plaintiffs would have to show kind of like a structural and decades-long kind of practice that led to some sort of racial discrimination in the voting districts. All right, so this is the same thing here. They have to show that the city of Los Angeles for several decades kind of like led to this policy. Now, then they also have to address the fact that there's a remedy for this, okay? They did a very good job of all of that, the plaintiff's law firm. They absolutely did. They showed, you know, like the practices. They had, you know, they showed how these particular laws, there was one in 2020, it was called DTL, sort of districting and something Los Angeles 2040 plan. And that basically they showed how it codified this kind of containment policy. How did they show that? It kind of showed that there was zoning designations just for the Skid Row area, and that only there did it permit kind of this homeless encampments and things like that, you know, and that it was clear, and they showed how kind of different policing practices and things like that, how they just started disregarding like drug use and stuff like that in Skid Row. You see what I'm saying? So it kind of, they started doing that. And then they even found how, this is the part that was just awesome. They determined how the city of Los Angeles can fix this, okay? They found like there were certain, you know, several acres of property in the city of Los Angeles. I never thought there would be such a thing as vacant property, but there was a lot. And then a lot of it like near the airport and some other areas that was undeveloped. that they could like use for this purpose. And then there was the L.A. General Hospital. That's funny. The General Hospital. I wasn't there some sort of soap opera, the General Hospital, right? Okay. The L.A. General Hospital was vacant for like 15 years or something, and it had like 2 million square feet of land, like in the building, and it was a big like facility, and it was just vacant forever. So they said, well, that could be turned into a homeless shelter. They found, there's the federal government during COVID gave the city of Los Angeles, billions of dollars to address, for aid to the cities, right? They could have used that money. They can use that money for this practice. They kind of showed how the city of Los Angeles, when they would try to clean the Skid Row, they would have to they would hire these washing companies. This was a shocker. Like to water clean the streets once every like couple months, because there'd be like some sort of like herpes or COVID or other things that would just spread like crazy in Skid Row. So they would kind of like wash everything out. But that cost millions of dollars to do, right? So they did a very good job showing how the city could fix all this, all right? Because that's one of the elements. It's not, you have to show that there's some sort of racism, and then you have to show that that the city has ways to fix it, but they're not doing it, because if there's no way to fix it, then it's like they have no remedy, right? So the plaintiffs did that. They did all of that, and they did it very, very well. So what ended up happening then in later 2022, okay, the parties reached a very, very comprehensive settlement agreement. And in the settlement agreement, the city of Los Angeles agreed to pay something like $250 million, okay, give or take a little, depending on what it's going to end up costing. And so we're talking a lot of money, right? So the city of Los Angeles agreed. It's really funny. The settlement agreements, they put in there, but all of us agree that we did nothing wrong, and we weren't, we didn't discriminate, we didn't have unfair practices, but just so we could avoid this little lawsuit, we'll go ahead and put in $250 million, okay? So to me, it's their way of saying, okay, we done screwed up and now we got to fix it. Okay, so here's the settlement agreement. And for the lawyers out there, it's like, wait a minute, let's see. These folks, they did some good here. They forced the city of Los Angeles to really, really come after this. And remember the part where I said about this whole jurisdictional. This was all through the federal court. Now, the only reason the city of Los Angeles settled this case is because they feared they would lose in the federal court, right? And if the federal court, the federal court has all the authority in the world, they could say, okay, city of Los Angeles, you owe $2 billion to fix this, or you have to give up, all this land to this other entity, or they have, that's the federal court. They could do all that. The federal court has redistrict voting areas. They've remapped school districts, right? The Brown v. Board of Education, that was a Supreme Court case, right? So the federal government has the authority to do all that. And the city of Los Angeles feared that because the plaintiffs did such a good job, right, that they entered into the settlement agreement. So some of the settlement agreement, some of the terms, this is the settlement agreement, some of the terms state that, here we go. The city agrees to create a required number of housing or shelter solutions, which is equal to, but may be greater than sheltering, at least 60% of the homeless people. All right. Cutting to the chase. Okay. So in the agreement, they said, okay, there's about 60,000 homeless people. They're in these areas, blah, blah, blah. And we're going to immediately build shelters for them. Okay. So that was all in this settlement, at least 60%. Okay. Now there's more provisions there. The reason why the plaintiffs agreed to 60% is because even if they had 100%, a lot of homeless people just won't go to the shelters, so it's like, okay, we'll build 60% of it at least right away. Okay, city agrees to implement an approach of equitable distributing housing and shelter solutions. So in addition to the 60%, they have to, they're going to have like kind of plans that they have to then set aside to figure out how we're going to put those shelters in place and fairly distribute it throughout the area. Okay, so it's so then it's not all going to be in one place. All right. Then they agreed to fund this program called street engagement. Street engagement, not where a couple gets married. No. Street engagement, kind of like these services that go on the street, so to speak, and kind of help these folks out. Okay. The city agreed to implement and enforce public space regulation and ordinances throughout the city as to individuals who decline an offer of shelter, meaning that for people that don't want to go into the housing, that they would have other places to stay and other services and things like that. So it's not like, okay, go to this shelter or you're screwed type of thing, right? And that the city would kind of come up with a plan of how to deal with these things in terms of like the services for the people that don't want to go to the shelters. The city of Los Angeles agreed to certain deadlines, like within 30, like they agreed to do these things and they agreed within 30 days, we're going to reach this, or within 160 days, we'll have this many shelters. Within a year, we'll provide this. All right. And then they even, even in the event of fires, floods, earthquakes, epidemics, quarantine restrictions, or other natural catastrophic occurrences, the city agreed that they would have special money and provisions in case of those things. All right. Now, and gosh, there's a lot more. And they did agree. Now, the plaintiffs' law firms did a very, very good job. Remember when I said that? The plaintiffs' law firm did a very, very good job. And the city agreed to pay that law firm $1,800,000 in legal fees. Okay. And keep in mind, they were getting paid also because there's a lot of funding for homeless and a lot of, charity and everything and other ways that they raise money. So they were paying the law firm, and then the city, there was a deficit in what they owed the law firm. Okay. And the city agreed to pay $1,800,000. Now, there is a lot of jurisprudence and issues behind that. And basically, I'll give you the short version. If a government if there's some sort of like constitutional violation, and you prove it in court and you win, then the plaintiff's law firm is entitled to attorney fees. The reason why that has been the case is because if it's not the case, then a poor person, for example, they don't have the money to hire a law firm type of thing. So then it could be that you have this great constitutional rule, but people can't enforce it because they can't hire a lawyer, right? So then the rule was, if a law firm wins and determines that a city violated a constitutional provision or the state or whatever, then the state would have to pay their legal fees. All right. And so here the city said they settled this because it seems clear that the city knew they were going to lose, right? So they even agreed to pay the law firm $1,800,000 as part of the settlement agreement. So I would say that the city finally came through. Let's see if it works in terms of this. It is, I don't know. I am a lawyer, so I could only opine about the law. There is this theory out there that's like, well, the more services a city provides for homeless people, the worse the homeless situation becomes, because then, other cities will send homeless people there, or somehow the homeless people will just migrate there, things like that. I don't know. I don't know if that's true, because there's another train of thought that says, as you provide shelters and get people back on their feet and medical services and drug-related services, that a lot of people do get back on their feet, But like I said, I'm just a lawyer. That's my expertise. And in this particular case, we have a clear example of the state government having to kind of come through and provide all these services based on what the federal government the authority of the federal government. All right. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I do. I always love talking law. And thank you for all of you that have commented and asked me questions in the past week. Like I always say, give me a call, 619-672-1741. I love hearing from everyone, or send me an email, joe@samolaw.com. All right, until next week.